Good morning and welcome back to the Homeschool Library. As always, this is Brad. Glad to have you aboard. So today we are back with another adventure in the continuing ongoing adventures of Casca Rufio Longinus in the Casca series by Barry Sadler. And that is volume 4 here, Casca Panzer Soldier. As I said in the last video, this one goes off in kind of a different direction from the previous 3, which are more or less chronological. In book 1, The Eternal Mercenary, we are introduced to the story of Casca, the origin story of how he was the soldier in charge of the crucifixion of Jesus. And through that, the events, Jesus kind of curses him with immortality, that he is going to remain on earth as a soldier in some capacity until the second coming of Christ. And that book covers roughly the first 70 to 100 years of him kind of figuring out his immortality. In book 2, then, The God of Death, we find Casca kind of in North Germania, roughly, based on clues in the book itself. I think it's supposed to be kind of around Denmark, where he meets a group of Germanics, kind of proto-Viking culture. He meets and he falls in love with a woman named Leda, who is actually blinded by her father. He falls in love with her, they marry, and she's his first great love. They stay together for many years until Leda's death. And he's so broken up by that, it's time he needs to leave, get away, go adventuring somewhere else, go a Viking, as it goes. So he and a bunch of his comrades, they build themselves kind of a proto-Viking longship, and they head across the sea to Mesoamerica, where they get involved in warfare between the Teotihuacans and Olmecs. And Casca then becomes the kind of the origin of the legend of the Quetzalcoatl, who will one day return back to that country. Volume 3, then we find him back in heading back to the more Eurocentric area. Well, he's not there for long. He decides to head east. He winds up in China, where he becomes a warlord in the early Chinese emperor in the late 3rd century AD. Then we've got Volume 4, Panzer Soldier, which takes us to World War II. Very different feel in this novel. I've alluded a couple of times in this series of reviews that there are rumors of ghost writers involved in the series, people who weren't Barry Sadler stepping up and at least punching up part of the books, writing snippets, doing rewrites, if not writing the entire book. And I think this is one of them. I've heard rumors of there are different little bits in perhaps at least books 2 and 3 of that happening. Book 4 here, Barry Sadler may have had something to do with this, but I'd say this is at least 90% someone else. There's no evidence for any of this exactly. Nobody's entirely sure who wrote some of these others, but the consensus is book 4 here was written by Kenneth Bulmer, who was predominantly a science fiction author. He wrote the Antares series, very kind of planetary adventure series in science fiction. He also wrote under several other pen names. Adam Hardy is a name that he wrote under. He wrote the Adventures of Fox, which is kind of a seafaring series that I'm going to have to feature someday on this channel. I haven't read all of those yet either, but that's going to be a project for the future. And I'm quite certain that Bulmer definitely wrote Volume 4 because it's got more of his voice in there, especially after reading some of the Fox Sailing Stories books. This has got, it sounds much more like him than it does Barry Sadler. It's more visceral. I would even go so far as to say it's more brutal. Yes, we're talking about World War One, World War II rather, as a subject matter, and the worst parts of World War II. Predominantly, this deals with Casca. He's a soldier of the Third Reich, which at first look, especially from an American audience, the choice for that might seem questionable. But when you take into account Barry Sadler, who is a Vietnam veteran, his intense loathing for communism, the Nazis, Germany, I'll say it that way, were on the front of fighting the communist Russia under Stalin. So placing him in that perspective on the front, especially around dealing with the fall of Berlin, as the Russians came in and kind of took over the city, and that the intense, fierce fighting around that, it makes sense to put Casca in that position. Historically speaking, you can almost see where he kind of gravitate towards the German cause as well. Certainly the Third Reich of Germany, and even prior to that, under what they call the Second Reich, under the Kaisers, had a lot of Roman influence. They'd adopted the eagle standard of the Roman Empire. So it kind of flowed. I can see where Casca, being the Roman soldier that he was, would kind of gravitate towards that warrior outlook. And there's some internal dialogue involved in the first half of the novel that does kind of get into that, until as it goes through and he realizes, he and his Panzer tank crew, they realize that they're fighting the wrong war, or they're fighting on the wrong side of this war for the wrong people. Anyway, they philosophically, they don't agree with how the war is being fought, especially as they see some of the brutalities of the treatment of people. He certainly doesn't agree with the treatment of the Jews and anyone who's not considered, the Aryan master race, which is interesting from his perspective, going all the way back to his origin, that he would have any kind of compassion for these people, especially anyone of Jewish extraction, given that it was a crucified Jew who put him in this position. So there's kind of a lot of cool philosophical underpinnings here involved in what Casca's thinking about and the position that he's in. Eventually, it does go all the way through to the fall of Berlin, as the Nazi regime collapses in on itself. And at this point, the antagonists from the last book, the Brotherhood of the Lamb, make another appearance in a way that you would not expect. But in the context of the book, it's really cool organically how they make their appearance. And I don't want to give too much detail, because I want you to go out and read it for yourself. So I'll try to do this with giving as few spoilers as possible. The Brotherhood of the Lamb, if you haven't watched the last video, is a cult involved in tracking Casca throughout the world throughout the ages, throughout the generations, because they believe that wherever Casca is, that's where Jesus will show back up. So they're trying to, in all of their cells that they've created all over the world, they're trying to organize events to bring about the second coming. And of course, they see the Jewish people as the ones who killed Christ, their Messiah, which confuses Casca, because he's like, okay, you know he was a Jew, right? And he winds up being captured by the Brotherhood of the Lamb through their leader, who happens to be a very significant historical figure that you would know and recognize if you know anything about World War II history. Heinrich Himmler is the chief elder for the Brotherhood of the Lamb. Hence that the final solution problem, the extermination of the Jews, that's their plan. And it goes all the way back to the Brotherhood pact. So they bring Casca in, and they inform him that they know exactly who he is. He's been operating under the German name of Karl Langer. He's been the head of this Panzer tank crew, a decorated German officer. And they've allowed him to continue in this capacity so that they can keep their eye on him. And it gets to a point where they invite him to meet Adolf Hitler, who it is revealed that the Brotherhood has orchestrated Hitler's rise to power. He's just a second-tier member of the Brotherhood, but now he's kind of gotten out of control, and it's fallen apart. So the Brotherhood is going to abandon this project that they've started. They're willing to lose the war so that they can move on to something else, and they're abandoning Hitler to whatever may happen. But Hitler is obsessed with Casca. Students of World War II and Hitler, you know that Casca was obsessed with the occult and all things. Of him, he wanted to track down the artifacts such as the Spear of Destiny, the Spear of Longinus, which does make its appearance again in this book. And Casca sees that and goes, why? Why is all of this obsession with this crucified Jew and with this spear? Why can't I ever be rid of it? And Casca is actually, through all the organizations of Hitler and everything else, Casca is there. He's present at the moment of Hitler's supposed suicide. And I'll leave it at that so that you can go read the book and find out exactly what happens and why it happens. This is a great book. I really think it's one of the best so far, even though it's not Barry Sadler. I really do believe that Volume 4 was written by Kenneth Bulmer, and that's not a criticism. For whatever reason, whether Barry Sadler just needed a break and the publisher needed a new book, that they went completely in another direction, another 1,000 years in the future to World War II instead of focusing on kind of chronologically the ancient world. The book doesn't suffer because of that. It puts you in a completely different field. And it's really good. It's really well written. I think book 4 is a lot of people's favorite in the series for good reason. It really is. Volume 5, we go back in time again to the time period that we've already become familiar with. And more on that in the next video. But I'll leave you with that as far as book 4 is concerned in the continuing adventures of Casca Rufio Longinus. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope I've inspired you to check out the Casca series. If you haven't already, I absolutely recommend it. You can really kind of start anywhere in the series. If you have a book in your collection or some random number, pick it out, read it. It'll inspire you to get the rest of them. And they're not hard to track down. Even the early books have all been, I think they've all now been reprinted by current series author Tony Roberts, who's well into the 50s by now. That's number of books, not age. I'm not sure how old Tony is, but Tony's very passionate about the series in continuing it. He's really taken ownership of it, and he stays very true, as I understand, to Barry Sadler's vision for the series. I've not read any of the current books. I have the original 22. That's probably where I'm going to stop for now. At some point in the future, I may check out some of the latter ones. If you've ever read some of those, the later ones by Tony Roberts, let me know. I'd love to know your opinion on those. Convince me to check them out. That'd be great. So have a great day. Stay tuned for the next video where we'll talk about book 5. And yeah, we'll see you next time. Brad out.